So, looking at the first one, we're doing blood from the heart to the left quadratus lumborum. Again, where is that quadratus lumborum? Is it anterior or posterior? Posterior. So we're going to start in the heart, and then we're going to go into the aorta. That's going to come up, and then dive down, pierce through the diaphragm, and then to get to the left quadratus lumborum, what vessel will I take? A lumbar artery, arterial, capillary muscle, venule, and then what type of vein am I in? A lumbar vein. Can I take my lumbar vein to the inferior vena cava and up? No, I've said you can't do that. So where are we going to go from our lumbar vein? Ascending lumbar vein. So I start going up the ascending lumbar vein on the left side. I pierce the diaphragm, and then what do we call the vessel? The hemiazygous vein. That hemiazygous is going to come over and then drain into what vessel? Azygos. The azygos comes up and drains into what vessel? Superior vena cava to the heart. No. Yeah. Maybe on the final he might ask you to trace it through the heart, but now he doesn't care. Question in the back?
What was after the aorta, in between the aorta and the lumbar?
The lumbar artery, or the lumbar artery? Nothing.
Nothing?
Yeah. You don't have to say, as he said, you don't have to say thoracic aorta or abdominal aorta. All you do is you follow the aorta, and those lumbar veins are branches right off the aorta. I would, just to be safe. Safety first. Again, you'll never get docked points for increased specificity as long as your specificity is not incorrect. We ready to go to the next trace? Okay. This time there is a block in the internal thoracic arteries. Trace blood from the heart to the superior portion of the rectus abdominis. Okay, so we need to get blood up here. But we have a problem, because if we were normally getting blood up here, what would be our vessel that we'd want to use? The superior epigastric, which is an extension of the internal thoracic arteries, which are blocked. So how are we going to get blood to here if there's a blockage up here? Collateral circuits. We have two options. We can either use our lumbar arteries, or we can use our inferior epigastric. Since we already used our lumbar arteries, let's have fun and use the inferior epigastrics. So, we start in the heart, and then we move into the aorta, which dives all the way down, and then that's going to branch into two things we call the common iliac arteries, which branch again, and we have the external iliac arteries. And what's going to branch off that external iliac? Inferior epigastrics. Those are going to come up my abdomen, and then I'm going to get a collateral circuit, and they go into the superior epigastrics arteries. Then you go arterial, capillary, muscle. And I didn't ask you to bring it back to the heart. No. Because again, right now we're just tracing blood. Blood does not diffuse.
I was just I wrote TB on the test just to show that that's what's happening. I know
Okay.
that's not what's happening, but do we write?
Is there a way to show the collateral circuit right there?
I've never seen on the test that you need to show collateral circuit. Again, you could say collateral circuit and point to the space between inferior epigastric and superior epigastric, but I haven't seen it as something you have to do. You can just list the columnar list.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the superior epigastric goes directly into the SB state?
If we're talking about the vein,
Yeah.
so that superior epigastric vein, again, is going to drain blood up here. So as it drains and goes up, what does it become as it pierces the diaphragm? I heard it. It becomes the internal thoracic veins. And those drain into the right and left brachiocephalic veins, which go into the superior vena cava. So again, if you're thinking about this is my anterior side, let's talk about the arteries. Off my subclavians come down my internal thoracic arteries. And that's what they're called until they pierce the diaphragm, and then we call them the superior epigastric arteries. And it's the same thing for the veins. As you drain it, it's superior epigastric veins, internal thoracic veins. So those thoracic veins go into the brachiocephalic veins, superior vena cava, heart. Is that clear, or still no?
Yeah. It's the same for the lower, it goes to thoracic, and then to epigastric.
So for the lower, are you saying like the inferior epigastrics?
The lower, inferior.
So the inferior epigastric veins, you guys help me. If I'm going back to the heart and I'm in the inferior epigastric veins, where do I go to next as I drain down? I'm going to go into my external iliac veins, right? Because if you think about it, when I'm heading that direction in the arteries, I go aorta, common iliac artery, external iliac artery, and then I branch up into the inferior epigastric artery. When I'm draining back to the heart, I'm in the inferior epigastric vein, external iliac vein, common iliac vein, inferior vena cava, heart. Five minutes looking at the pictures will also probably make everything stand a little more, be a little more clear. Other questions with letter B? Okay, and then finally letter C. The external iliac vessels have been removed because of lower limb amputations. Trace blood from the heart to the inferior portion of the rectus abdominis and back. So my legs were cut off. That means, for the sake of the question, my external iliac vessels were cut off. But I need to bring blood down to my lower abdomen. So we're going to start in the heart, and then where will we go? The aorta. Let's say we're going to the right side. So I'm going to be in the brachiocephalic artery, right subclavian artery, and then I go down through what? Right internal thoracic artery until I pierce through the diaphragm and might become the superior epigastric artery, and I go and there's a collateral circuit, and I go into the right inferior epigastric artery, and once I'm in there, I'm in the region of my muscle, so arterial capillary muscle. Now, as we go back, it's exactly what we just explained with the previous question. I'm in the inferior epigastric vein. However, I can't go down to the external iliac vein because it's been cut off, so I must go up. So if I'm in the inferior epigastric vein, I drain to the superior epigastric vein, to the internal thoracic vein, which drains into subclavian or brachiocephalic? Into the brachiocephalic. Again, that's where things aren't symmetric. The internal thoracic arteries come off what vessel? Subclavians or brachiocephalics? The arteries come off the subclavians. The internal thoracic veins, do they drain into the brachiocephalic or the subclavians? They go into the brachiocephalics. Remember, that is asymmetrical. So we're in the brachiocephalic, superior vena cava, heart. Questions with traces?
You said the arteries go off the subclavian.
Correct. Okay. One last thing we'll teach with the last 5 minutes is just kind of a way to simplify the venous drainage of the gut tube that we have to memorize. So, in your lecture manual thing, there's a picture with a bunch of names, etc. And it's kind of, I think it's simplified if you just draw it. And again, this is the drainage. So to get back to the point, all of the gut tube venous drainage, does it go to the inferior vena cava, or where does it go? I heard it, where does it go? Into the liver, right? And why does all the gut tube blood drain through the liver? It's a portal system for regulation of all of your metabolic stuff. That's why the liver gets hurt if you drink a lot of alcohol, because it detoxifies everything absorbed by your gut tube. So it's going to go through the liver, and it was actually pretty interesting. Back in the day, they used to think that the liver pumped out your blue blood and the heart pumped out your red blood. because they looked at the liver and it looked like it was pushing blue blood out towards the gut too, when they just killed somebody and looked at them, or somebody died and they looked at them. So, but then the heart had all the red blood coming out of it. So it was actually this interesting, that was the paradigm for hundreds of years, that the liver pushed out your blue blood and the heart pushed out your red blood. Because they saw all of this blood that's blue coming out or heading towards the liver. Interesting story. Anyways, so if I want to think of how blood goes to the liver, you just think it's a B. It's a B for bicycle, and all bicycles have a kickstand. Okay, so everybody's drawn this B. And again, this is draining into the liver. So what do we call the big vein that drains into the liver? We call it the hepatic portal vein. And on this first, the upper portion of the B, we cut it in half. The upper portion we call the left gastric vein. And so what would you guess the lower portion is called?
Right gastric.
Right gastric. Okay. And then this portion of the B is kind of cut into thirds. This top one is heading over to the spleen. So what do we call it right here?
Splenic.
Splenic. Some say splenic vein. And then we have a portion that's in the greater omentum on the left and in the right. So what do we call this one in the left?
The
Left gastro-omental vein. And then this one, as we cross towards the right side, we'll just call the right gastro-omental vein. And then we have this vessel that's draining blood from the hindgut and draining it into the splenic vein. What do we call this vessel draining the hindgut? Inferior mesenteric vein. And we also have this other vessel that's draining the midgut, so what do we call it? Superior mesenteric vein. And remember, blood flow goes this way and that way, type of a thing. So if I'm in the left gastromental vein, I go to the splenic vein and over here to the hepatic portal vein. And the hepatic portal vein, we call it the hepatic portal vein when the splenic vein and the superior mesenteric vein come together. At this point right here is when it transforms from splenic and superior mesenteric to the hepatic portal vein up to the liver. So you just remember your B for bicycle with the kickstand, and you can draw the venous drainage. And we'll talk about arterial supply in later lecture. Any questions with this?